Somebody emails and asks that there has been a lot of talk recently regarding the ahadith that mention the Ghazwa-e-Hind, or the issue of an army or an expedition towards India as one of the signs of the Day of Judgment. Can you tell us about these ahadith? Are they authentic or not? This is our first question for today. A brother asks from Pakistan actually, that a lot of our scholars in that region are currently talking about Ghazwa-e-Hind. So what is the ruling of these ahadith about the narration of Hind? So today inshallah I actually went over these ahadith in detail, and this is a summary of those findings. So we said there are three traditions in his Ghazwa-e-Hind. What is the third one? He says عن محمد بن عبد الرحمن عن أسد بن موسى عن بقية قال حدثني أبو بكر الزبيدي عن أخيه محمد الولي عن لقمان بن عامر عن عبد الأعلى بن عبد البهراني عن ثوبان مولى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال قال رسول الله. Who is the Sahabi here? Thawban. Who is Thawban? Thawban is the most famous of the freed slaves of the Prophet ﷺ. He narrated over 90 ahadith. The Prophet ﷺ had over 40 slaves that he owned. Every one of them he freed over the course of his lifetime. Many of them, like Thawban, volunteered to become a servant after they were free. Thawban was a free man and he became a khadim of the Prophet ﷺ, and he narrates over 90 traditions in Muslim Imam Ahmad. And Thawban as well, by the way, most of his narrations are about the signs of the Day of Judgment. He would collect those ahadith, he would love those ahadith. So this is Thawban. So in this hadith, Thawban, now this is a totally different hadith, not Abu Hurairah. Thawban said, I heard the Prophet ﷺ say, عصابتان من أمتي أحرزهم الله من النار. This is a totally different hadith. Two groups of my ummah, Allah has protected them from the fire of hell. Two groups of my ummah, Allah has protected them from the fire of hell. عصابة تغزو الهند وعصابة تكون مع عيسى بن مريم عليهما السلام. A group that shall go on an expedition towards Hind, and a group that shall go with Isa ibn Maryam in the end of times. Okay, now this hadith is a totally different one from the hadith of Abu Hurairah, right? And by the way, it is also in Musnad Imam Ahmad with a slightly different isnad, but going back to Thawban. So we have Imam Ahmad saying Abu Nadhr from Baqiyya, from Salim, from Muhammad, from Luqman, from Abdul A'la, from Thawban, that he said عصابتان من أمتي أحرزهم الله تعالى من النار. So we have here hadith number 22,396 in Musnad Imam Ahmad, which is also going back to Thawban. So the concept of the Prophet ﷺ telling us that there shall be a group going to India, and that group is a protected group and a blessed group, that concept is pretty clear. Is that now understood? Even if Abu Hurairah's version might be C minus D plus in terms of the isnad, Thawban is a good hadith. And put together the concept of the Prophet ﷺ telling us that my ummah will go to Hind, and in the other version Hind and Sindh, this is something that is inshallah ta'ala very explicit and clear. Now, these are the only narrations, Thawban and Abu Hurairah. There are no other narrations about Hind and Sindh. And by the way, of course, all of us should know, especially us from that region, that this has already obviously occurred. The very first expeditions that were sent towards Sindh was during the time of Umar ibn Khattab and Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu anhum. However, this appears to be only ships that were meant to see what is going on. It wasn't like large expeditions. As we all know, the large expedition that went and first basically entered Sindh in order to actually conquer portions of Sindh, this was done during the reign of Hajjaj ibn Yusuf al-Thaqabi. Well, not during his reign, he was the governor. And of course, the story, by the way, everybody should know this, this is basic history. The story is first mentioned in a book that is considered to be the first book ever written by Muslims of India regarding the history of India from the Muslim perspective. This is called the Chachnama. The Chachnama, I'm not inventing the name, it is the name, the Chachnama, because it talked about the Chacha dynasty, and I'm not inventing that, it's real. There was a dynasty called the Chacha dynasty. And so the Chachnama was the first book written in Arabic, by the way. It is said that its author was one of the people who went with Muhammad ibn Qasim, one of the persons who were appointed by Muhammad ibn Qasim. He wrote it in Arabic. We do not have that original. 200, 300 years later, a Persian translation was made. We have the original Persian translation. We do not have the original Arabic. It is now lost. The original Arabic is lost. What we have, which is preserved in the British Museum, is the Persian translation that was done in the 9th or 10th century CE, not the original Arabic, and a lot of work has been done on this. And of course, as you can understand, there are questions of its authenticity or whatnot. Nonetheless, in the Chachnama, which allegedly was written by one of the shuyukh and the qudat of Muhammad ibn Qasim, he mentions the famous story that a group of Muslim ladies was captured by Raja Dahar of India, and the Raja had basically captured some ships that were being sent from Ceylon, Sri Lanka to Baghdad. And on that ship were some young ladies whose fathers were Arab merchants and whose mothers were Sri Lankese. And so the fathers had died. So the king of Sri Lanka, as a gesture of goodwill, was sending the families and these young ladies back so that they can be with their father's side of the family. And on the way, Raja Dahar, or they say some pirates under Raja Dahar, confiscated, and then obviously the ladies were taken. And news reached Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. Raja Dahar refused to give the ladies back, and so he sent his cousin Muhammad ibn Qasim. Muhammad ibn Qasim, he sent him at the young age of 19 to basically go and conquer elements of that region. And this is when the first conquest took place, and 3 major city-states were established, most prominently the city of Mansoura, which was a walled city. It's like a 3-hour drive from Karachi, and also the ancient city of Multan, not the modern city of Multan, that's a different one. The ancient city of Multan was also established over there. Muhammad ibn Qasim ruled over that region for a short period of time. There's a huge controversy, by the way, amongst the historians, because you have 2 completely opposite narratives about Muhammad ibn Qasim. Those who sympathize with him and those who didn't. Those who sympathize say he was a tolerant, open-minded, he didn't force anyone anything, and then you have the critics, they have the exact opposite view. Nonetheless, Muhammad ibn Qasim ruled for a few years, then some tensions happened which we're still unsure of, and he was recalled by Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. And after him, the Habbarid dynasty started ruling for around 150 years. And of course the Habbarid dynasty, I always plug that in because I wrote a paper about the Habbarid dynasty when I was at Yale. And I also wanted to show you a coin that I have from the Habbarid dynasty. I'm a coin collector, by the way, if you should know this by now. So one of the things I did, I collected some of the ancient coins of the histories that are written about. So this is actually a coin of the Habbarid dynasty that dates back to around 100 something Hijrah that they made in Sindh. After the Habbarids, who came after the Habbarids? Who came after the Habbarids? Who's going to tell me? Oh, Muslims of India and Pakistan, who came after the Habbarids? Come on, you know this. Very good, Mahmud al-Ghaznavi. Ghaznavi came after the Habbarids. And so Mahmud al-Ghaznavi came and he rescued Islam from the Habbarids, because the Habbarids had become Ismaili, by the way. So Mahmud al-Ghaznavi came and he then took over that region. Then who came after Mahmud al-Ghaznavi? Which dynasty? The Ghurid dynasty. Then the Ghurid dynasty became what? The Delhi Sultanate. Then the Delhi Sultanate was about to collapse, and then what happened? Babur comes in, and then Babur comes in with, that's true as well, but generally speaking the time frames are as I have said, but you are correct, these are other minor dynasties. Babur comes in, establishes, of course, you're correct, Babur defeated Lodi to become the king, and then Akbar establishes the Mughal Empire. The Mughal Empire lasts until 1857, when the British come in and the quote-unquote mutiny or the independence happen, and Zafar Shah Bahadur, the final of the Mughal kings, is sent into exile in the land of Nepal, and he dies a miserable and lonely death. May Allah have mercy on him. Anyway, long story short, I mention this to be very clear about this, that we know what is happening in India right now. We know what is happening. And this talk is not meant to go into that issue. And the talk of Ghazwa-e-Hind, the ahadith, are used by certain people for nationalistic reasons. Allah knows best. It appears that these ahadith are of the past, not of the future, meaning it's already happened. Some people are trying to make this as a round 2 in order to have another Ghazwa-e-Hind. And Allah knows best. In my humble opinion, the ahadith seem to mention the first batch, and that's happened. May Allah bless them and whatnot. And I'm not saying it's impossible that the hadith are talking about the future, but it appears it's about that. My point is not to become political here. My point is to make a very, very factual claim, and that is as follows. When you look at the history of Islam in India, by and large, the extreme Hindus, the Hindutva, the RSS, the BJP, they present Islam as something that is foreign, as colonizers, as people who came and took away our culture, right? And this is something that we need to be very clear about. The Muslims who came to Hind and Sindh, they might have come from outside, agreed. And we can understand why some people would find that problematic. But they are not colonizers the way the British were. This is factually incorrect. Every time the Muslims came, they became Indian. And they ruled India as if it was their land. And they took on the culture and the customs, and they gave back to the culture and the customs. They were not external, aloof colonizers like the British were. The British didn't learn one word of Hindi. The British lived separate from the masses. The British imposed their language on us. The British looted everything, even the word loot, they looted it as well. And they took it with them. The British came when India was the most powerful economic force in the globe. And when they left it, it was a withering, symptomatic third world country. The British Empire would not be the British Empire had they not taken much of their wealth from the Far East, especially from India. You cannot accuse these Muslim dynasties of anything of that, because they took for their own peoples, which was the Indians. And Hindu and Muslim both benefited. It is factual to say India would not be in the India that it is today had it not been for the Muslims of India. The culture, the cuisines, the language, everything, the architecture. Biryani came from the Mughals. You wouldn't even, and I'm not joking, it did. You wouldn't even have biryani if the Mughals were not there. Can you imagine in India without biryani? Even will allow vegetable biryani, even though it's bid'ah in my opinion, but still, will allow vegetable biryani, okay? That was a joke, by the way. But anyway, okay. My point is, this notion of this racist notion of a pure Hindustan, right? Without the Muslims, we would be like this. This needs to be corrected. I understand some fanatical, people of one faith are going to be angry. Why did that faith get involved? I understand. But to claim that Muslims were colonizers, that's simply wrong. To claim that Muslims ruled as a different category, different class, that is factually incorrect. And the India of today would not be the India of today had it not been because of Islam. Islam helped shape the Indian culture. And if the Muslims had not come to India, the India of today would be unrecognizable. We would not recognize what it is, right? I want to also tell you, by the way, I took a class at Yale by one of the leading experts of Indian Islam. She's actually from a Hindu background, even though she's agnostic. I took a class with her, and it was in her class I wrote about many things, including about a dynasty. Her main thesis, and she's coming from a Hindu background, by the way. She's not a religious person, but her ancestry is Hindu. Her main thesis, which she proved throughout that class, was something that I had never even heard of up until I took that class in 2005 or 2006. Because my whole life I was believing Indian Muslims and Indian Hindus have always been fighting one another, right? Her thesis, which she proved in her dissertation, and throughout the class she kept on referencing evidences. Listen to this. There was never religious tension in India until the British came. The British, as a policy, instigated religious hatred. They were the ones who fomented anti-Muslim attitudes in the Hindus and anti-Hindu attitudes in the Muslims. And they did this, why? Who can tell me why? Divide and conquer. Divide and conquer. For 200 years, they kept on brainwashing each side to feel religious hatred for the other. And of the simplest evidences, which is mind-boggling in its simplicity, she said to us in the class, you can look at every single battle ever fought in the history of India after Ibn Qasim's reign, after that first generation. When you had a Muslim emperor or a Raja, Hindu or whatnot, you will always find in the Muslims' army some Hindus, and in the Hindus' army some Muslims. It was never a purely religious war. It was always politics. And Hindus and Muslims generally got along fine. And she always would say, the first riot between Hindus and Muslims happened under British watch. In all of India's history, there was never a mob, Muslim versus Hindu. There was never a riot based purely on religious grounds until the British came and they fomented that. And then in 1947, both sides realized they cannot live with one another. And I say this, why? To calm some tensions of those who have some intellect. We understand there are religious differences between Hindus and Muslims. We understand sometimes those differences are irreconcilable. We will leave them to the next life. In this world, we don't have to be at each other's throats. In this world, for 1,300 years before the British came, 1,200 years, Hindus and Muslims live side by side, generally speaking at peace with one another. This is the general rule. It was the British that came, and the British did their deed, and as usual, they slithered away and they left the mess in the lands that they came with. And we see that mess right now with what is happening now. And that's why I wanted to talk about this issue of Ghazwa-e-Hind, to give it a different twist. To mention that, okay, maybe it did happen in the past, but there's no sense of animosity per se. Generally speaking, without any exception, every Mughal emperor had Hindu viziers, without any exception. There's maybe one or two. Generally speaking, every Muslim emperor had good ties with some Hindu dynasties and bad ties with other, sometimes Muslim and sometimes Hindu dynasties, as you know. And to claim that India has always been divided on ethnic and on religious terms is something that is simply untrue, and this is one of the tactics of the British. So I just wanted to bring this in there to make sure that people understand that this is something that we need to overcome, and we appeal to the people of good intellect and of sound faith that what is happening now, it is dangerous to your country, it is dangerous to law and order, it is dangerous to the stability of your own country. Your own reputation is going to be harmed, and we make dua for those that are oppressed because we know what is happening right now. And I think all of us should be genuinely worried about what is happening in that region.